Joe, thank you for being here. We look forward to your presentation.
Great. And just for emphasis, we're going to focus on the commercial aspect of it. And I'd like to just make a couple of observations that are related. One is that I think this, and Brett Lambert said, I think we are in a very unstable situation. There's a lot of instability, and the entire world is going through changes, and space launch capability will be no exception. So I expect to see a lot of changes over the next decade, 10 to 20 years. I think in the NASA case, there's been some leakages already in that, Russia supplies a lot of our launch capabilities. And didn't mention it, but JWEST, the next big space telescope, is going to be launched on Ariane. So internationally, launch capability is a commodity. There are about 7 nations that provide it and sell it commercially. And so I expect to see, changes that. I guess just a general observation, talking about change, all of the things that are going on entrepreneurially in space. I like to say it's the U.S.'s secret weapon. There's no other, nation or economic system that have this commercial space sector that we have. And so ultimately it will be a part of the solution. So with that, I'll get in my presentation. I'm not sure exactly how this works.
There you go.
Okay. Oh, need to go the other way.
I could just run it, Joe.
Hey, great. Appreciate that.
Joe is my former boss.
He should have known right away. Hey, I'd like to say also that over the years we've done a number of studies looking at customer preferences for launch vehicle choices selection, and in general, that preference is always for reliability and price. And when it comes down to, making a selection, they're very elastic. I mean, if there's a better option, they'll willingly go there. And again, I'm talking about the commercial guys. And so internationally, as we've established, they have a lot of influence. So the roles are shifting, as I said, and we talked about the U.S. being essentially a large, stable customer that supported the industry for decades, over 50 years. However, in an era of constrained budgets that we're in, everybody talks about sequestration and the like, commercial can play a larger role, and I think this is some of the instability that we see. I saw in Space News an article, I think it was not this week, but last week, in which ELV was, and so they were talking about, I think, $20 to $25 billion in upgrades and improvements over time, and I think through the 20s. And they were also talked about a $35 billion launch for 60 launches. So if you do the math real quick, you come up to $1 billion a launch, and on average. So I think that's part of the instability. And as I said earlier, global launch competitors are already influencing our policies and our options. And I expect this to be continued. I don't know, maybe Peter can talk to it later, but I don't know what's happened to the National Space Transportation Policy that we expected to be released about a year ago. Obviously, there should be aspects of that influences, the industry going forward. Okay, if you look at the conventional markets, and we've already talked about, the numbers are fairly low, and so we're not going to get out of this just by looking at, what's going to happen over the next decade. It's largely the geosync telecommunications guys, and you can see the number of launches is less than 25 a year, and the the number of satellites less than 25, and the launches are less than 20 launches a year. So it's not going to support the market, and it tends to be dominated by Ariane and Proton. And I'd like to say the Russians are the biggest capitalists out there. Next chart. So what are these other new markets that could conceivably, add some demand? It's not going to be remote sensing, even though there's some interesting things going on there in terms of commercializing weather and climate. And the imaging satellites that we know have already been commercialized. But those are small in numbers. However, there are a number of developments that are underway to increase our capability for the launch of humans and commercial crew and cargo. And those have some potential possibilities. So space tourism, again, we haven't flown that many, so the demand hadn't been that high. Basically, it's been a very constrained situation with Soyuz being the only one and having to use spare available seats when they come up. However, the forecast shows that potentially there are a lot of people that want to go into space, and this could increase the demand. And so Space Adventures have done a forecast which says 143 people if we had the capability through 2020. And we did some studies in the early 2000 time frame that said, the demand would be 60 people a year by 2021. So there is a demand out there. Just what is it, and just how much is yet to be tapped. So anyway, that's one source, space tourism. Next. Okay, the sovereign clients, and again, in the past, a large number of astronauts have been flown in other government programs, either the Russians or the U.S. Primarily, and there is a demand out there for other sovereign nations to fly humans in space, and so Bigelow Aerospace has proposed orbital habitats, and they have an interesting sort of next stage experiments coming up with NASA. And again, looking at the market size, some assessment has said, up to 216 people would be willing to fly over the next decade. So again, commercial space for human crew could produce some demand. There are other markets. Again, the ISS. There's hope there that it would produce additional demand from the experiments and things that are going on, and hopefully that success will turn into greater demand for follow-on research. However, there's some question about ISS and will it go beyond the early, to the 2020 time frame. Small satellites, there's a growing interest in small sats, and there are quite a few of them being launched, and they're looking for access to space. And again, this could be the beginning of something that could turn into larger activities. They don't create a demand for EL-class vehicles. However, things like hosted payloads and all could be the beginning of, again, more commercial space activities. Suborbital flight, in a similar fashion, could open up new markets like tourism and additional space research and a demand for additional platforms after proving things out in the suborbital space environment. So again, this could be another future source. But again, coming around to the charge, what can government do? Well, they can continue and maybe even accelerate the development of these commercial crew systems. Get them certified and help to create these new markets, because cargo alone is not going to do it. Again, it's a relatively small number of flights. Government can be the initial customer and again continue to provide the support. and also provide and help evolve new markets, because NASA does have in its charter the responsibility for enabling new markets, and those new markets could be other than non-U.S. government users. Even if these markets aren't fully realized, they can still generate additional demand and enabling new entrants, competition, which is very important, and ultimately lower prices. And the government should look to foster and support innovations that, again, increase reliability and reduce costs, because that's what the marketplace is really looking for. They're looking for low-cost access to space. But I'm encouraged by all of the entrepreneurial activities that are out there, and while many of them won't succeed, some of them ultimately will, and we really need that. Anyway, and I'm sticking to it.
Great. Thank you, Joe.